Hi, Mette. Thank you for being here today. So you're here today because you want to share with us a story based on transforming higher education for the Next Gen Lead program. The Next Gen Lead program started on October 31st and is ongoing until November 21st. And this interview is for next week's focus, which is on curriculum change. So thank you so much for being here today. I am from France. My name is Lauriane. I did my studies at EDEC Business School. I was Secretary General of Oikos Lille. And I'm also involved in Prime because I am the student voice for Instagram for October and November 2020. So I know a little bit of Prime, of course. And yeah, again, I'm really happy for you to be here. Thank you for your time. So if you can present yourself for the people who are going to be watching this video.
Thank you very much, Lauriane, for having me. It's a great pleasure to be part of your Next Gen Lead project, and I'm very happy to be here. And also thank you for all the things you have already done for Prime on the Instagram. Really appreciate it. So my name is Mette Morsing, and I'm head of Prime, Principles for Responsible Management Education, an initiative of the UN Global Compact. So I'm based in New York in the UN Global Compact office. And what we work with in Prime is about students and education towards more responsible management, and also working very much with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. I've been on that journey, I think it's fair to say, for more than 15 years. I was working 10 years at Copenhagen Business School, where I founded back in 2002 the Center for Corporate Social Responsibility back then. And then I was invited by the Copenhagen Business School management team to take on 5 years working across 15 departments in the school on how to integrate sustainability into education, into research, and into partnership programs. And 15 departments is a lot. So this is operations management, it's marketing, it is finance, it is organization theory, and so on. And then for the last 3.5 years, I went to Stockholm to lead the MISM Center for Sustainable Markets at Stockholm School of Economics. And on that long journey, I met a lot of engaged students. And that is one of the things that drive me, and one of the things that I think is truly delightful about having this job. Now, of course, being based in New York as head of Prime, I am privileged to have a global perspective on things. And that has also brought me in contact with students from around the world globally. And I think that's very exciting. What I want to share with you today is perhaps 3 trends that I see in the global landscape. And I think it's really exciting, even in the context, the dire context of COVID that we all live in right now. And the first thing that I really see clearly is a change in business schools and universities from focusing on sustainable development as coming out of a single discipline. Typically, a business ethics professor has a personal ambition or passion for that particular project and drives that into the school. But what we see now is not just the business ethics professor engaging with students who are, you could say, already convinced that this is a good idea. We also see how deans and not least students are pushing schools to have sustainable development across all disciplines. So again, thank you, students, because you are really pushing us, the faculty, professors, educators, to do something. One of the things that really impressed me at Stockholm School of Economics was one day a group of students came and knocked on our door and said, we're gonna have a seminar next week. Please come and listen in to all us professors. And what they had done was that they had went through meticulously all programs in the school, and they had looked upon where is there a conspicuous lack of sustainable development. So what they did for us at that invitation, at that meeting, was they presented 90 suggestions, very concrete suggestions for how professors could integrate sustainable development in the curriculum at the school. So that's what I call student agency, taking the initiative, not waiting for the dean, not waiting for the professor or for the educator, but simply doing it themselves. So I really enjoyed that and pushing the agenda across the school discipline. The second trend that I think is very closely related to the first one, and that is this, we used to have stand-alone courses on and electives, business ethics, sustainable development at the periphery of the school. Right now, we see this is becoming a mainstream concern for deans and for schools, because they are also pushed by the media, they are pushed by the accreditations and the rankings to actually engage in sustainable development and also account for how they engage in sustainable development. And that's also the role of PRIME, of course, to make that push, but also help schools to actually make that happen and to improve on this agenda. And the third trend is that that I think is really interesting. And again, this is something where I hear the student voice very clearly. And that is sort of this move from what we could call capitalism 1.0 to capitalism 2.0. And what I mean by that is, when I was discussing with my colleagues 10 years ago, we were discussing why sustainable development, what's in it for a business school? It was very much an argumentation about the business case, very business centric, thinking how can we as a business have a larger profit by engaging in sustainable development. And while that is very important, of course, to think like that, what we see today is a strong tendency for looking more towards systems thinking. And I know this is something that you also are very engaged with in your work. So the systems thinking here means it's not just the business case and how can we sort of as a business have more profit from marketing or from developing more green project. No, this is about thinking, how can we use business to improve society? And it may seem like a little play with words, like a little twist with words, but it's actually a huge sort of transformation of how we rethink the role of business in society. Because here business becomes a tool to improve society, you could say, and not the other way around. So that systems thinking, I think, has become very truly evident in the context of COVID, where we see an urge, even if we think, management schools only and not the larger university landscape, but management schools only think, okay, what are the disciplines, the typical, organization theory, marketing, strategy, and so on. But here we see a sudden urge to think political science, to think what's the role of government for good societies, what's the role of health, having a good health in your country, in your region, internationally. How can we sort of put that into our thinking in management schools as well? And how do we collaborate internationally? Well, we've been taught a lot about competition and how we sort of have 5 driving forces, the competitive landscape. Maybe there's more to that narrative when we think systems thinking. We think collaboration and cooperation is perhaps in the long run a better solution for everyone. So I think these 3 things they interweave, and they also occurring at the same time. But I think your focus on systems thinking is very right at this particular moment in time. It's happening right in front of our eyes.
Thank you very much for sharing about this. So do you have a more specific story to share about either your work at PRIME or before that, or?
Yes, I want to sort of, the specific story, for example, the story about the students taking agency at Stockholm School.
That would be so interesting if you can share about this.
Yes, and I think more stories like that, where students actually come and knock your door, for myself, has happened quite a number of times. So students coming knocking on the door, this is an old story, but still something that I will never forget. 3 young students, entering my office and saying, could we have, half an hour of your time? And we ended, sitting there talking for 3 hours because they wanted to start up a student initiative on sustainable development, and they didn't really know how to start. They didn't have any money, but they had a lot of energy and they wanted to mobilize more people. So that's what they did. So they were liaised with my center. So I supported them, I helped them, but mostly moral support, because they did all the work. So they are now they grew into a large organization at Copenhagen Business School at the time with 22,000 students. But now they are a proud member of oikos and part of the oikos family also. So again, this sort of happened. It's not like a grandiose thinking about being big from the beginning, but small little initiatives that can actually help step by step to change a school and to push an agenda in the school. And that's indeed what has happened with the students in the case of Copenhagen Business School, where the students were pushing the agenda and challenging us. So I think it is important for students to think that it is not just about sitting there and waiting, for the revolution to come. No, you create that revolution, and you can even, just by asking questions to your professor in the very classroom, is perhaps a subtle way of revolutionizing, but it makes a difference that students are sharp, that they dare, of course, in a good and informed way, dare challenge what is happening in the classroom and beyond. So my sort of my small stories here is about that student agency and how it matters in the small and also in the large context. And this is, of course, what I hope that I can also support from the PRIME office, from the PRIME Secretariat office, and share these experiences globally between you students, but also between students and faculty at a sort of global level, you could say.
That's amazing. We love how, knowing our oikos chapter create like that. But I was wondering, actually, it's really interesting what you say, that those students, they dare to actually, speak up and say what they thought and create change. And you said it can start just by having a discussion with professor, but I feel like there might be students who are, they either are too afraid or they don't know the process, because, I've been Secretary General of a chapter, so I know school administration, sometimes it's a really heavy process to make any type of change. So what advice would you give to somebody watching a video today who reflect on this curriculum change and think, oh, I think that we could change this. I think that maybe it would be great if we can include that in the curriculum, but they don't know where to start, and they don't know what's the process to do that?
This is a very, very good question. Very good question, because I hear, that kind of reflection also. And for example, a few weeks ago, we were in kind of similar discussion with some students or some teachers teaching students in post-communist countries, where there is not a huge tradition, a long tradition for student, you could sort of say in the classroom at least, challenging professors, for example, and post-communist countries is just one example. I mean, it's probably the norm more than students being invited to challenge the professor all over the world. So my advice is to be well informed, be really, really well prepared, know your stuff, and then ask these questions, not in an angry or in a, you could say, sort of affectionate mode, but more prepared, savvy, good questions that even make your teacher, your professor, reflect about what is said in the classroom. And that's one thing, but the other part of the recommendation is you need to have patience, because you're probably not going to experience that change yourself. But please, when you leave the school, look back after you've entered business or entered an organization and got a job out there. Look back after a couple of years and see how you may have contributed to change for the next generation behind you, who are now facing slight change in the curriculum, new cases, other tones that you have managed to set in that school, because you raised those questions, and because you have maybe, if you are able to mobilize some of your fellow students to do that with you, so you are a little group, because that is of course not just more fun, but also more gives you more authority if you are a small group doing this together.
That's amazing advices. Thank you. And I'm actually wondering how PRIME can help also students, and what resources we can get from PRIME about curriculum change.
Yes. So and thank you again for allowing me to use this space to talk a little bit about that, because we are in conversations with oikos, and we have actually the president of oikos is on our board. So that in itself is very important. So we have a number of different things we would like to do together with oikos, but not just oikos. And that's of course part, because we are a UN organization, we want to be inclusive. but oikos' wonderfully strong, well-organized network around the world, we would like to understand how that could serve as a kind of an, you could say, umbrella in terms of reaching out to other student organizations in other parts of the world, if that is Latin America, if that's Africa, if that's East Asia, in order to, because there are many organizations out there that we haven't surfaced yet or we don't know about so far, that I would like to have into the conversation. And from there on, understand what could be in the students' interest, because I can dream up a lot of things I think would be fantastic for students, but I'm not sure students would find it equally fantastic. So right now we are exploring with the president of oikos, what would students be attracted to, because you are terribly busy, all of you. You have your degree programs to follow, you have your student jobs, you have your student engagement in organizations. So what could we do globally to connect you with each other, with students around the world, on something that could be helpful for you, it could be engaging, and could sort of show not just the complexity in the world, but also how do we then address that complexity in the world. And I want to use Prime as a platform for this, because I hear some of my colleagues being fearful about the potential of a polarization of our societies and a nationalization of our society. So we are closing more and more in, not least due to the political landscape, but also due to the COVID system, where we do not travel as much. It's going to change academia, and it's going to change, international student exchange probably a lot. And I think that exchange has been so helpful for students appreciating other parts of the world, appreciating strange perspectives. And I want students to be exposed ongoingly to strange or other perspectives, to be familiarize themselves with how do we deal with that, because that's the way we need to not just run our businesses, but also as human beings into the future, we need to develop that understanding and respect for not just complexity, but indeed also for the other and those that we don't know yet. So I hope that the Prime can serve as a platform for students, but I need you to help me understand what would attract you to actually engage in a Prime activity, because I can tell you there's a lot of faculty who would like to arrange things with you.
And the call has been made. So if you're watching this video, really do not hesitate to check out Prime and see how you can, start the curriculum change within your university. And my last question would just be, if there would be one main message that you want people to watch today to remember from transforming higher education, one short message, what would it be?
Thank you very much. Yes, I want you to think about something that you also yourself, you call this self-awareness. And to my surprise, I hear more and more deans talk about self-awareness and empathy as part of a, wouldn't put it on the curriculum, but as part of the journey being a student. So when the deans say something, you listen, and we listen, because then things are going to happen. And they talk about self-awareness and empathy in order to be a good leader in the globalizing world. So I think that's my main message. How do we do that and make sure to remember to focus on that in the future?
And that's definitely part of what we talked during Next Gen Lead, the self-awareness. It was the subject of last week. We talked a lot about it, and we had really nice discussion during our different session. And yes, and I completely agree with you. I think self-awareness is really important if you want to become a responsible leader. And it's amazing to hear that deans are taking that into account because, they influence education a lot. Thank you again for being here today, for sharing about that. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Lauriane, for having me. It was a pleasure.